The publication of women's literature has profoundly contributed to the world of literature and the rights and responsibilities women feel throughout their careers, publications, and words placed in their stories. However, there were hardships and difficulties women surpassed to alter the rights and responsibilities seen as their additions to literature in the United States.
I think about rights, I think about my rights to my intellectual property, my copyright allows us to make money from our work. It's what allows us to control what's done with our work, how it looks, sort of what it implies.
And so the rights and responsibilities are wrapped up in the public sector rules about how these documents get published and used.
And then in terms of responsibilities, I feel that when you have something published, first of all, you want it to be as good as it can be. You want it to be well edited. You want it to look good. You want it to be a good product that people are spending money for.
My responsibility is to be thorough in the documentation of what has happened in a study and to be sure that pieces of information are clear and they conform to best practices.
The rights are the actions that women retain from what is given as a right through government and laws, while responsibilities are described as obligations and expectations seen in society in order to be successful. During the early 1800s, United States of America was undergoing and promoting alteration in responsibilities, as seen through many innovation and changes in society during that period. Although women were becoming slightly more recognized, they were only gallantly published under the names and publication titles of those who instructed them on what they believed needed to be associated with the women to be successful. An example of this is in the Gentleman's and Lady's Book of Politeness and Propriety of Deportment, dedicated to the youth of both sexes, by Madame Selnart in 1841. In the introduction to providing more politeness and propriety to Americans in the 1800s, the author states, "Propriety of deportment is a valuable result of knowledge of oneself and the respect and rights of others." And the publishers have thought it would be rendering a useful service on the side of the Atlantic. These statements brought forth the expectations involving the responsibilities surrounding being published industrially. This female author considered these concepts into a book initially approved and published by a male-led company, Grigg and Elliot. Other females wrote and published similar books under similar titles in other companies, almost entirely formatted around selling standards and the responsibilities that should be contributed to the distinguished Americans' lives under a company of male leadership. The rights and responsibilities that the women in this period began to withhold created changes in the literature that were considered beneficial to many publication companies statistically. These women underwent hardships in publishing personal work into the industry.
I was struggling in a lot of ways to get published. I was, sending query letters out to agents and getting rejected. That process was long and it was very emotionally difficult.
Authors like Louisa May Alcott, author of Little Women, became hired and paid beneficially by periodicals, and a number of copies of the books printed and sold, starting on September 30th, 1868, and published by Roberts Brothers. The Roberts Brothers Publishing Company was started in 1856 and continued to publish in print literature until 1898. Louisa states, "I've had a lot of troubles, so I write jolly tales." To successfully collaborate with this publication company, Louisa altered her work to fit the company's standards. This company is a significant aspect of publication for women in the mid-1800s. Louisa May Alcott, Helen Hunt Jackson, Susan Coolidge, and many more females were published and considered successful under this publication title. They all underwent the obligation of alteration to be published.
If an editor had said, "We like it, but we want you to make this change," I would have considered that very, very seriously. And if change I felt I could live with, I probably would have made the change in order to get that book published.
There was a consistent but not exponential increase in women's publication continuing further into the late 1800s and early 1900s. This created a more open stage of responsibilities seen through the female publications. Some examples of literature produced are Anne of Green Gables, first published in 1908, Vogue magazine, first published in 1892 and continues today, WYCA magazines from 1854 to 1946, famous works like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee in 1960, and The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros in 1984. Despite the growth in female publications at the time, there were still hardships in creating a completely feminine-oriented and operated publication company with rules where women decide what they are interested in publishing. Helen Davidson, the writer of Prelude and the 1854 Diary of Adeline Elizabeth Hoe, mentioned in an interview that her story was published with the local publication company, Peter E. Randall Press. This novel and typewritten version of the original 1854 diary were published as something from the family and not intended to be incredibly successful. However, Helen Davidson states that when the book was published in 2012, there was no struggle to get the book published, had time to devote to the work. This company that provided Helen with the opportunity to publish states in their website that Peter E. Randolph Publisher was founded in 1970 to provide a high-quality book publishing service for municipalities, groups, and individuals. We can see how the growth of publication companies has allowed more opportunities for women to publish their work and altered the rights and responsibilities to do so. The first woman owner of a publication company was Katharine Graham. Born in 1917, this woman was interested and continued through publication and journalism for much of her early career. Later, this woman became the owner and function of the Washington Post after the passing of her husband, Philip Graham. Although she was not technically elected to act as the leader and publication manager at this iconic and well-known company, she continued to cover stories and the publication of that work from 1963 to 1991. Alicia Shepard, a former author from NPR, states she was plunged into the role of being the publisher of the Washington Post in an era when women didn't hold those kinds of positions. Her rights and responsibilities increased from being a reporter and supporting her family to leading the publications and significantly benefiting the growth of one of the most well-known and successful newspapers in the United States.
Also, a group of women who were employed by some of the big publishers in our field, and they also have had a big voice and held leadership roles and been very important in the development of our field.
So the publishing industry has actually come to be almost completely dominated by women.
The growth of impact that women maintained through publication has been a significant and noticeable change from the early 1800s to recent publications. While there are still hardships and opportunities that are considered difficult by women, the significant growth in how it has benefited literature as a whole in the United States only suggests that the rights and responsibilities seen through the eyes of authors continue to grow broader and more vast. The willingness to continue and alter the rights and responsibilities obligated to be published under the name of women have become more common and well known. How the rights and responsibilities have converted from simple fashion and grammar being the only allowed publications to significant movements for change, the leadership of publication, and equality with men in publication society inspires the future greatly. As Katharine Graham stated, "Let's go, let's publish."